So this is the knife that I made in my previous video, if you want to have a look. So made from a circular saw blade with, I don't know, walnut or oak handles, something like that. Not actually 100% sure. Got a decent edge on it now, but giving it another sharpen. And yeah, it's looking alright. Nice little camp knife, and it's got really lovely grip to it. Does feel good in your hand. So, you know, this would be quite a good skinning type knife. It would be good for game prep. It would be good for like cutting and cooking. We want this to go on a belt for a start, and we're going to want a loop on the back of it now. So because of the shape of it, I'm just trying to think. So it's going to have, this bit here would have to be wet formed, and I think it will have to go in about this deep. So the sheath is probably going to end up about that long, and then we'll leave that bit sticking out of the sheath, so it sort of wedges in. So where this gets wider, it will just wedge in like a cork in a bottle. That will stop it falling out, and then I can wet form it as well. So I'd say that was about your highest point there. So let's just get an outline of it. There you go. So then don't do inches. Right, let's give it about 5mm all round. Right, so that's going to be the sort of shape of our sheath. So this is internal, so we're still going to have a bit more for stitching. But that's, so this has now become our blade blank. So I've gone for that extra because I want to stretch the leather. I want to wet form it. So we're going to have the stitching this side. So we'll give that another, let's give it 10mm. So a 10mm from the edge. And the reason we do this is cardboard is free, leather is expensive, so we can do as many prototypes as we like. It really doesn't matter until we get something we like the look of and we like the feel of and the size of and all that. I'll just go for a fold over like that. And that's going to sit in there. So it's got to go in at that angle, because if it goes like this, it will stick through the side. And if I go like that, obviously I've got a load more leather out here. So it'll have to go back in the same way every time. But this extra 10mm, I can always shorten that down. But this is the area where we need to stretch the leather to make the sheath so that can stick in there. And then we've got to leave enough width at the top as well to get the blade in initially, right? So I think it may be better if we had a higher back. Or that. So when that's on your belt, you kind of hit this piece first. If that makes sense, try and get the angle right. So you hit this piece first, rather than it slipping behind the sheath and you're stabbing yourself. You've got a bit of a guide to steer her in, if that makes sense. Then we force that into there. We sew up around there. Oops, already coming out the bottom. Like that. And then we're going to have we'll have a belt loop on the back as well. Okay. I've gone for biro just so you guys can see it properly. Makes it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. Okay. Blade's a bit rusty, but there you go. Now, if we can do straighter constant cuts, you just, instead of sawing at it, you just do constant cuts, because that will give you a smoother edge on here. If you just hack about it, it's not going to be as nice. Okay, so you can see it. You can see where I've taken 2 cuts there. Doesn't really matter because we're gonna bevel all the edges anyway. Right, so I might as well just continue that, and I'll get this piece of leather out of the way. Then I can pack that away to one side so it doesn't get damaged. So that's the thickness of our leather, which is about, don't ask me about 3.5 mil, 4 mil. So quite a chunky piece of leather, so it should make a nice sheath. You see a lot of cheap sheaves, they're sewn on like this. Okay, so when that goes on your belt and the weight is moving up and down, all of the weight is going onto the stitching. Yeah, if that makes sense. So that weight is coming up here against and hitting against the stitching, right? So to mitigate that, we turn that around, we sew that on first, and then we bring it down, a bit like a question mark. Okay, so now the weight of your belt is on the leather. Yeah, so it's going to ride on this piece rather than putting weight on the stitching and tearing the leather. Okay, so this will, even though it squishes right down, yeah, will make it a little bit easier. And you're about 130 mil. So from there, let's go 140 just to make sure. Right, so because I'm going to stitch this on after, I'm not going to be able to get to it, so I need to do all the edges and all the dyeing before I sew it on. Okay, so we're going to do the edging. Okay, so we're going for Finnegan's oil dye in black. That is what the colour I was asked for. So don't cry that it's nothing to do with bushcrafts, because I've had that plenty of times before. Right. Let it drip. Yeah. It will come back. Right, always put these lids back on, because if you knock them over, they make such a bloody mess. If you watch my videos, you will see where I've thrown it all over the floor. 7. Half. That'll do us. So this score line is to give us a hinge, so we can fold this over in the centre like that. Okay, just gives us a little bit more purchase, and then once this is all matched up, oh, that's not bad, that's not terrible. Okay, now this should be fairly good. Yeah, that's decent. I'm happy with that. So this has got to be sewn on first. If we stitch this all up, we're not going to be able to get to the stitching to do this. So this needs to be sewn on first before we sew anything else. So okay, so let's have a talk about pricking irons. So what we see is some people getting a drill and drilling all the way around here. Okay, now that removes material. Okay, now if I stab a hole through, the leather is still there, so it can still expand and tighten around your cordage or your whatever you're sewing with. Okay, so you're much better to stab holes or cut holes rather than drill holes. We don't want to remove material because it's not going to grip the thread as strong, if that makes sense. Now here is a selection of pricking irons. Now I've got some very tight together ones here, right, which doubles the amount of time you're gonna be stitching, right? We don't want to spend all day stitching, so let's get these ones, right? These are bigger gaps, so these are, I think these are 6mm apart. Yeah, so these are 6mm, so these are 6mm apart on the holes, and these ones are probably 4mm, 3mm. Yeah, so don't get these mixed up. Jettison. Right, so a 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a 4. That should do us for what we want. So if we just gently prick these first, just to make sure it'll all fit in. Could we do away with that? Oh, just not enough. So if we do 4 up there, 4 up there, and then a 2 in the middle, just changes our spacing a little bit. Yes, we'll do something like that. And then the other end, we'll have a square. Can we get a 4x4? Yeah, should be able to. 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. Okay, so when that is tucked around, you're going to have a lot of stitching here and some stitching there. Not much weight will be on this, it's just to hold it in place. Everyone follow me so far. Put your hand up at the back if you're not sure. There we go. Right, so that is ready to go on. There's one final thing I want to do before I sew this on, because it's going to be a little bit easier. I'm going to put some edge coat on this. So edge coat is this stuff. It's sort of like a rubber solution, kind of to keep water out. This is a little makeup sponge, which is fine for this. Oops. Now we want to do, just gently paint around this edge so it will stay nice and rounded and nice and sealed. Now a lot of the time I do my leather work in brown. I use the walnut oil. I just think that looks a little bit more bushcrafty, which is another reason why I don't usually do this, because it just looks a bit weird having black edges on everything. I know you can get it in different colours, but this stuff is expensive as well. So okay, so we've gone all around the edges there, and we'll set that to one side with the D-ring so I don't forget it. That can sit there because I'll do the rest of the sheath in a little while, and then we'll put the lid back on. Okay, so I've got a set of dividers here. Now I want my stitch, we've got an extra 10mm all the way around, so I want my stitch to be 5mm in from the edge, okay, all the way around. Okay, so what I'm going to do is from the centre, now this will all make sense in a minute, right, because where are we? Little mark there. It's quite handy this being black actually. A little mark there. So that is our centre line. Okay, now we just do a gentle mark there. Okay, now I'm only going to do the pricking irons on one side to start with, and then we glue it together then I will force through these holes, because what can happen is these holes don't line up with these ones. If you go around doing all your pricking iron all the way around, getting them to match is really difficult. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the pricking irons. I'm going to cut a groove so the stitching sits down into the groove like that. Yeah, so your stitch will sit into the groove, so it's going to be more abrasion resistant if something rubs on the outside. Okay, so I'm going to set this for about 5mm, which it already is, and then I'm going to put a nice line all the way up here like that. Okay, simple stuff. Now we start off with one in the middle. Right, so we want our knot to be underneath this part. We don't want it this side because it'll be visible, and we don't want it this side because it'll be visible. So what I do, I come in this corner, like this, and we pull it through, so we're starting on a corner. Okay, then I go through the next one. So again, so where shall I start? Start this corner. Sorry, come up. Little knot in the end, just in case it wants to pull through, but it won't. So we did our holes, so now we've got this scored. So we want to go wrong and we want to cut out in between our holes. Now be careful here that you don't go off the edge, because that would be a disaster. Now, I've heard many different points of view on this, so if you do this, you are breaking the surface of the leather, which could affect your amount of waterproof. But if you don't do it, your thread will sit above the leather unless you're tying it ridiculously tight. Your thread will sit above the leather and then it can wear. So horses for courses, I don't really know. I've done it loads of different ways. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. Unless you're going to be out 365 days a year, I don't think it's going to fall off, is it? On a fold 9, yeah, it's lovely. Okay, so before we glue it, I like to have a different colour on the inside. It just looks a little bit more professional. So we're going to go for a bit of green. This also helps treat the leather a little bit, stop anything rotting. Obviously no one's ever going to see it, apart from this top bit where the stitching is. But oh no. Put the lid back on. Evo Stick contact adhesive. Now, I actually prefer the solvent-free one that's white. It's got a slower drying time. It doesn't stink, and it tends to keep a lot better. But this is all they had in the shop, so this will have to do. Yeah, because this one tends to dry out really easily, which is a bit crap. Right, so I'm just going to draw a rough 10mm line all the way around, just as a guide for me gluing. I'm going to make myself a brush, like that. So just soaked this in water for about 5 minutes, just until it stopped bubbling really. And I've wrapped the knife in cling film. Now this is a carbon knife, so if I leave it wet forming overnight, the knife is going to go rusty. We don't want that. So we set that in there nicely. We're happy with that, yeah? Now the knife, right, so I've got a spoon. Right, so it's been in the oven now for on the lowest it will go, which is like 50 degrees, for about 45 minutes, just so it's dry on the outside. Doesn't look like it's going to fall out, does it? That's not bad. Get yourself a little bit of the leather treatment, which have done a video on. We'll massage this in, because this is still warm where it's just come out of the oven. It's going to soak in all these oils, and these will stop it from rotting. Get it in all the bits and bobs. Right, now all I've got to do is put another loop on here, as in a belt loop. So if that's hung on a belt loop, as it moves or you sit down, it's not going to strain your stitching. Because if that's straight on your belt like that, as soon as you sit down, you're going to start damaging it. Okay, so there we go. And we've got a dangler here, so it can flap around. And it's, so you've got 3 poppers holding it So this popper will be against the back of your belt, so it shouldn't come undone. And then you've got the other two there for a safety. The knife sits in there quite well. All I really need to do once it's properly dried out is seal that inside edge, and then we're done.